right. Hi, everybody. I'm wrangling a couple things at once. This is what happens when you run a conference and present at the same time. Don't know who thought that was a good idea, but I appreciate everybody's patience. This is what happened. Okay. And we should be good to go. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. No one is introducing me. I'll just have to talk for myself. Okay, let me know. Somebody post in the chat if you can hear me okay. I have captions at the bottom, which hopefully are showing up all right for everybody. And we will go ahead and get started. So I'm going to be talking today a little bit about CoughDrop, the CoughDrop app. But a lot of the things we're going to be talking about are not specific to CoughDrop. We're going to be talking about remote communication and specifically digital communication and how that can support our AAC communicators and actually provide us with some new tools for our toolbox that can help us as we're trying to help communicators to be able to grow and develop the skills that they need. So we're going to be talking about a couple different things. I like to talk, I'm going to put links to all the research is in my slides, which there should be a link on the session page. If there's not, I'll post it afterwards. But there's links to all the research behind everything. We're going to go a little bit, not deep, but we're going to dive into some of the research that's there so you get an idea of where I'm coming from with this. And then we'll talk about some strategies to help support communicators in developing AAC communication and how digital communication can help with that. I'm going to talk about the CoughDrop app. I'll do a mini intro of what CoughDrop is just so you have an idea, and we'll jump into some of the specific features that you can benefit from in our brave new world of teletherapy for all. And at the end, I'm going to have a little bonus. There's a little announcement that we're making as part of this conference that you can see and be the first to hear about, and we'll continue from there. So here we go. Here's our agenda: intro, talk about the research. Gonna go jump into demo time, and then should have some time at the end for questions as well. So my name is Brian Whitmer. If you haven't met me before, I'm a computer programmer by trade. My background is not in speech language pathology or assistive technology. So I had my crash course back in 2012 when we learned how much my daughter wanted to communicate with us. She has Rett syndrome and she's non-speaking, but she uses, actually she uses a Toby with CoughDrop installed on it as her communication system. And it took us a little while to sort of get the hint how much she wanted to interact. But then after that, we've dove in and it's been really good to be able to see her grow and develop. So I am very invested in the idea of AAC and the value of AAC for developing communicators. Our daughter Becca is now 13 years old and she has an attitude, and she started going to a church group for young women and immediately developed a sarcastic streak there. It was like she was just waiting to see somebody else give her permission to be sarcastic. So that's been fun to sort of tease out from her communication when she's being serious and when she's not, but it's been really good. And she's grown a ton. So we're going to be talking, like I said, about digital communication. The hypothesis, and I've talked about this a little bit in the past, is the idea that digital communication can actually improve adoption of AAC for AAC users. And when I say digital communication, I'm talking about multiple modalities. This can be video communication for therapy, but also for video calls with family and friends. This can be text messaging or posting to social media, any of these mediums where, typically when we think about AAC, we very much focus on this sort of face-to-face modality where I'm with you in the room and I'm going to use this to talk. So we're going to have partner assisted scanning, or I'm going to have a flip book, or I'm going to have a device. And all of that tends to happen face-to-face, which is good. And there's a lot of value in those face-to-face interactions. They provide a lot of prompts for us, and they give us lots of opportunities to repair and support. But they're not the only medium for communication. And nowadays, especially, they're not even the primary form of communication we have a lot of times with the people around us. So we want to make sure that we can support communicators in developing this, what may be a new skill set, which is digital communication for an AAC user. As we've talked to and worked with families and practitioners who are sort of transitioning to this remote model of interactions with people, we've heard over and over again how hard it's been for AAC users. They feel like they're disengaged. The people around them feel like they're not able to engage as much or connect emotionally as well to people. They get on video calls, but it's like they're a passive participant because they don't understand it, or they don't feel like they can, keep up, or, there can be lots of reasons why these concerns come up. But we've heard lots of times that AAC users are struggling with our new medium of mostly remote communication. So we don't want that, right? We want to help them, and we want them to be able to have the same interactions and the same supports as their peers. So let's talk about some things we can do for that. First of all, the question, can AAC users benefit from digital communication? There's been a lot of research, well, not a lot. There's been some research actually on digital communication for AAC users, mostly, as you can probably imagine, since the 2000s. And what we found is that AAC users tend to feel more isolation than their peers. They tend to have a harder time with emotional connections and maintaining those emotional connections, but that they, at least as far as the research and the surveys show, they want that just as much as anyone else, and they value it, and they wish that it was different. So it's not just a matter of it's different and we're fine with it, but there was lots of expressions of desire. A lot of these are based on surveys of adult and older AAC users recounting their current and past experiences with interactions. So, your mileage may vary, but there's a lot of good insights, and I'll pull out some quotes from that as well. There is research on digital communication for all of us. It turns out that there are not really prerequisites for these digital communications. We see very young individuals who are able to embrace digital communication, whether that's sending messages or video conferencing with grandma and grandpa, talking to these smart speakers that are showing up now, social media. The age just kind of keeps sneaking down when users start to participate in social media. So there's lots of digital communication that happens in the world around us. And there's not, families will impose age limitations on things, and that's fine, and that's very healthy. But it doesn't seem like there is a functional or a capacitive limit on those digital communications. So are there prerequisites? Just like we talked about, the research has shown that there really aren't. I think that sometimes when we talk about AAC users, we may look at it and say digital communication, posting to Facebook or participating in discussion boards or texting somebody. I can see how that could get kind of tricky or complicated because, just the logistics of it. And so we tend to, maybe that's why we avoid it. I also think that sometimes we hold it off as the gatekeepers that we can be as practitioners and say, well, we're not ready for that yet, right? We're going to do face-to-face. We're doing it with communication partners that we know and trust because those are the ones that we're comfortable with, and we're not ready to open the floodgates, and we're not ready to add this other modality when we're still working on just, sort of nailing the face-to-face interactions. And I want everybody to think for a minute about whether or not that's actually a good thing. Dana Nieder is a mother of an AAC user, wrote a blog post called The Gatekeepers, where she talks specifically about how practitioners and experts, we end up being gatekeepers. We withhold resources and information and tools and strategies until we think it's the right time. And that should scare every single one of us, right? Anytime we're saying, I'm not going to give you this because I don't think you're ready for it, we should have a really good justification for why, and we should feel really self-conscious about doing it. We should be saying, is that true? And do other people agree with me that that's true? And maybe is there a way I can do this without having to gatekeep or without having to prevent individuals from having access to this? And with my argument here is that with digital communication, we're gatekeeping too much. There's too many times where we're saying, I'm going to save that for later because I don't know how to do it or because it sounds really complicated, when actually digital communication can be a huge asset and a resource for AAC users, which we'll talk about. So here's a little bit of research on AAC users and social media. What they found, like I said before, is that AAC users wanted those interactions. They found value in it. There was less generally there was less internet use by AAC users in general, and that can be because they weren't provided access to it, or because they needed additional accommodations. But there's concerns there that we want to make sure that we can get past. So you can dive into those if you want to. But there actually are a lot of ways that we can use digital communication to support AAC users. Digital communication actually can be a good asset because it can be something that we do impromptu. It doesn't have to be scheduled, and it can be asynchronous. That's what I'm going to talk over and over again about, how digital communication gives us opportunities for asynchronous communication, which means that we don't have to worry about the time limits that often happen when someone's staring at our face, right? There are many times where when in face-to-face communication, we have breakdowns, or we have communicators have a hard time with that interaction, because there's this expectation of, oh, I have to respond within 10 seconds or they're going to get bored, or they're going to think I don't care, or they're going to think I'm not interested. And a lot of that can go away with digital communication, not just text, but even video sometimes. But we can leverage our strategies to come up with interactions that are with multiple communication partners on multiple topics, sharing different things in lots of different ways that can go beyond just what we can do in a therapy room or what we can do in a therapy session. So something to keep in mind. Digital communication. Can digital communication improve AAC adoption? So rather than just, the research kind of shows that there's value in digital communication. There's an emotional connection that can happen. And so the next question is, can digital communication actually improve adoption? Can we use it as a tool in our tool belt? So rather than just saying, oh, it's something that's nice and makes people feel happy, can we use it as a resource so that when AAC users are developing skills, we can pull this out and say, oh, let's use this and let's leverage this. So we're going to have to take a step back into neuroscience, which is fun. And, you say neuroscience and people's eyes just kind of gloss over, but stick with me and we'll be good. Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit about motivation. We're going to talk about some different types of motivation and how we can leverage that. And we're going to talk a little bit about the learning process and the forgetting curve, because you'll see why in a minute. But here's the research, the links behind it. Okay, as far as cognitive goes, neuroscience goes, there's two basic types of motivation. There's intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. And what the research has shown, so intrinsic means it's something that's inside of us. It's a personal motivation. I like to call these identity-based motivators because it's something that I have glommed onto or I own. I want to be a good communicator, and so I'm going to learn to use AAC. Or I want to I want to be a journalist, and so I'm going to learn to ask good questions because I'm going to need that as a journalist. Whereas extrinsic motivators are things that are imposed upon us by an outside force. That can be grades, when someone says, I have to learn this because otherwise I'm going to fail this class. It can be rewards. So you can say, if you do this, I'll give you a cookie. And those motivators, they're not inherently bad, but what research has shown over and over again is they're not as sticky. When you learn something from an extrinsic motivation, you learn enough of it to check the box, and it's not as internalized, and so you lose it more quickly. So we want, where we can, to focus on these intrinsic motivators and the identity-based motivators, because they will help communicators to have better retention of the skills. A lot of the development deficiencies that are contributing to the need for AAC affect memory retention and affect learning ability and long-term memory skills. And so we have to kind of overcompensate in a way for some of those deficiencies. And so we're going to get really good at these intrinsic motivators. We're going to make sure that when we talk about teaching skills to communicators, they understand why. And it's not just a trick. We're not like, I'm going to trick you into learning this thing, right? But we're going to help you learn it. And because this is going to make you better at this, or this is going to help you with the skill. Is that something that you want? Is that something you're interested in being better at? And we can help them to sort of assert it as something they want in their identity. So that's something to keep in mind. Another cognitive sort of checkbox that I'm going to talk about for a minute is called spaced repetition. As we learn skills, we don't have to learn them. We don't have to drill over and over and over again with the same frequency. What they found is that if you learn something, there's like this graph of remembering it, right? So you learn something and boom, you've got it. And if someone asks you right afterwards, you remember it. And then as time goes on, if you don't review it, you're less and less likely to remember it over time, until if you learn it again, boom, it comes back up. And what they found is that the more, when you learn something, it comes up here and it kind of slowly goes down. And if you learn it again, the next time it's even slower to go back down. And the next time it's even slower, and you can spread out those learning experiences. So you don't have to teach it every day. You can teach it one day and the next day, and then a couple days later, and then a week later, and then a couple weeks later, you review it. And this can be valuable as we're talking about things like learning core words. As we focus on core word of the week, we want to make sure that we're not forgetting to incorporate old words. And as we talk about learning strategies, and we talk about, if we're going to start asking questions or sharing experiences or making observations with our communicators, we're going to work on those skills, and we can kind of spread them out. And the reason I'm talking about this specifically now is because digital communication gives us a good excuse to slip these in wherever we need them. Additionally, when we talk about learning and remembering things, what we want to do is we want to try to leverage any existing connections. If a communicator already knows something and we can associate new concepts, new words, new ideas, or new strategies with things they already know, they'll have more success. If someone's really interested in tractors and trucks, then we can start to use core words like move and up and down when we talk about tractors and trucks. And that will actually be stickier for them than if we just did it randomly and said, we had a toy that we were looking at and then we were lifting it up and down. It wouldn't be as sticky. And so we want to have those connections. And what better connections do we have than emotional connections with family and peers? So we're going to leverage those as in our digital communication as well. All right. Oh yeah, sorry, one more. The last one on this sort of, my sort of side topic. We want to be careful when we're working with communicators. We want to have low pressure because there are actually some cognitive deficiencies where when somebody learns when someone tries something and gets the wrong answer, because of the emotional response, they end up learning the wrong answer instead of learning the right answer. And so these digital communications can actually give us a chance to be able to give opportunities to have these interactions without some of the high stakes pressure that can come from, can you answer this right question for me right now? So we're gonna try to work on that. We want our language learning to be generalizable, relatable, and consistent. Sometimes that's hard to do when all we have is an intervention room or an intervention, Zoom call, as it is nowadays. But digital communication gives us a chance to break out of that. It gives us the chance to address all of these things at once because it's a flexible, authentic interaction. We can time these digital communications. We can time when we're going to text somebody or when we're going to share a video or a picture with somebody based on when we need them. So we can space them out and work on spaced learning. We can send it to people that they care about, which will get us some association with things that they already know and help improve long-term retention. We can do it in a way that there's not a right answer. And we're just going to say something. We're going to share experience. We're going to share a video. We're going to say whatever it is we're thinking about or what we feel like talking about. And so there is no right answer. We don't have that high stakes issue. So all of these things that we talk about improving the learning and retention, we can leverage all of them with digital communication, which is awesome. There's lots of quotes some of the quotes that I pulled out from those surveys that I was talking about. For digital communication for AAC users. For example, with social media, I have the opportunity to accurately represent myself to the world. Think about that for a minute. An AAC user is saying, look, I am me and I am me inside. And when I have face-to-face interactions, I have to sort of compensate, right? And I don't get to be my whole self. But when we're talking about digital communication, that gives me the opportunity to be my whole self. I don't have to limit it, or I don't have to, short circuit my identity just to be able to respond to people in the timing that they expect or that they demand. So there's a lot of value that we can draw from this in helping people be able to develop an identity and to be able to assert that identity in a way that's comfortable and less demanding. We can generalize to more communication partners because we don't have to have people physically in the room. I talked before about those intrinsic and extrinsic motivations, and we can have decision making. We can remove that timer issue that comes so many times with communication. So let me talk about a couple examples of individuals, AAC users who use digital communication. Desiree and Savannah are a mother and daughter who email each other. right? So they are obviously face to face very often, right? Sometimes they're not, and so when they're apart, they can also keep each other updated. But sometimes also when they're together, they can use email to be able to communicate with each other and to be able to share those thoughts and experiences that they feel are necessary. My second daughter, who doesn't use AAC, she uses digital communication to tell us the things that she doesn't feel comfortable saying out loud, right? So the other day, she was talking about some concerns she had with a little brother, and she didn't want to talk to us about it face to face, so she messaged us about it, and then they could sit down and sort of have that conversation. And the same can be true for AAC users, being able to have that medium where they can have, again, a chance to be their more authentic self, can give them a chance to say things they may not otherwise have actually said. Darla, the middle picture there, Darla is an AAC user who uses AAC in the workplace, using, I think Microsoft Teams now, but digital communication, just chat. So when there are video calls and things for work, Darla can use the chat to be able to participate in the conversation and be able to be part and engaged without having to force vocalization, which may not be comfortable or may not be possible in the moment. The last picture there is my daughter Becca, who 2 years ago decided she wanted to start an Instagram feed to be able to share experiences with people. For example, that picture, she really wanted to talk about how ridiculous her parents are, because we can be a little over the top sometimes. But that's how parents are, so deal with it. But having different opportunities for digital communication and being able to do it asynchronously and be able to have these, if you think about each of these individuals and their digital communication, those are highly motivating interactions that they have. They're authentic. They're a way for them to assert their identity, to be able to increase connections with people that they already care about or they're already connected to, but to do it in a way where they have more control. So digital communication can be a great resource if we can find ways to let it be so for AAC users. Another quote, social media gives me a fair playing field. The responses can be self-paced, and there's opportunities to be able to construct the whole sentence. When my daughter, for example, when she communicates in face-to-face with people, she doesn't have time. She uses eye gaze, and it's hard. It's really hard work for her. And so she's saying one word at a time. And so she's not speaking complete sentences. She's saying what she can. She's getting her words out just enough to be able to get the idea across. But when we're communicating digitally, she has more time. We can go through more options for what she means. We can get to the real heart of what it is that her intent is, and we can take the time to do that so she can have a more authentic interaction in a digital format. So keep these things in mind. Now, how can remote interactions effectively support AAC? As we work on supporting AAC users and developing these skills and becoming more proficient in their digital communication, this is a really important quote from an AAC user. I had become so used to not being able to say something in depth to a person that I started to believe that I was a person who didn't have much to tell people. You think about that. You think about someone who's gotten to that point and think about the amount of time it's going to take them to get out of that point, to realize that they have an inaccurate perception of themselves and that they do have more potential and that they do have more value, frankly, to interacting in the world around them. We want to help communicators get there. And so we're going to help them. We're going to be patient with them as we start to develop this. Beginning AAC users may not be comfortable or may not have even thought about the idea of crafting messages in this way for a digital format because, you could say one of the limitations of digital communication is the feedback is not immediate, right? So you're not going to get the same immediate response. You're not going to get someone making an excited face, immediately responding and bringing the thing that you wanted or acknowledging your interaction. It's something that goes out into the ether and then you wait until a response comes back. So it may not be obvious immediately why there's value there to a beginning AAC user. But I argue that for AAC users at any level, whether they're adults who've been using digital communication for a long time or beginning AAC users, there's value in giving them these opportunities for interaction. Their peers have them, and their peers are sending messages using mom and dad's phone, or they're sending videos on Marco Polo or whatever. They're doing video conferencing calls with family members. And so they should have that same opportunity for interaction. in the normalizing sense, but also because it will give them new opportunities to be able to interact with people around them. So we want to help them to be able to share authentic messages about themselves. And we definitely want to start simple. If you're starting with an AAC user and trying to sort of go down this path, you think about, let's say, for example, you're doing teletherapy, right? So you're doing video calls with someone and you want to start to experiment with this idea of digital communication. You could start with yourself. Right. So you could have the AAC user and their family put together a message and text it to you. And then you can respond to that. Or we can talk about picking a different communication partner that they can text and send a message to. AAC users in the beginning are probably going to need a little bit of help in getting this set up. We can talk about the logistics of how you would share messages, how would you text messages to people. And I'll show you how CoughDrop actually makes that super easy. But whatever system you're using, there's a lot we can do to make it easier. And as we start to experiment with it, it can be something fun and new. But we are going to need we're going to need a trusted partner to begin with. So there's sort of two types of digital communication, and I've called them video versus text-based, but really I should call them real-time versus asynchronous, because there's some that sort of blur the line. You talk about like Marco Polo, for example, or some other video messaging apps, where you can send a message asynchronously and wait for a reply. It's not two-way, having that sort of real-time demand. Real-time video is great for therapy sessions and to be able to support a communicator if we're talking about training, if we're talking about just having some emotional engagement. But if we want the communicator to be able to be participating, we should think really hard about asynchronous communication, whether that's writing text or sending video messages back and forth. Having an asynchronous option can help the communicator be able to take the time to craft the message in a way that's comfortable for them. It can give you opportunities to model for them, to talk about repair strategies if we need to add words to make things more clear for the communication partner. It gives us lots of chances to be able to sort of massage the message and support the communicator in getting their full intent out there into the open. There's already been a lot of great sessions at AAC in the Cloud on teletherapy specifically, so I'm not going to talk a lot about it. Indirect therapy, where we're teaching family members how to support an AAC communicator, is great. And we're going to have to do some of that for sure with digital communication. Sometimes if we're doing teletherapy and trying to get the communicator to craft a message right there, we're going to be working on prompting, and there may be a little bit of a modified prompting strategy, like I think Sarah Gregory just talked about a little bit ago. And then of course, there's all the pros and cons of using technology, which can have huge headaches, but can also give us a lot of value. So as we talk about digital communication, we're going to have digital communication partners, and we'll probably be the first one, either the therapist or the family members. We're the first one that will have them sending a text message to, or sending a video message to, or getting on a video call with. Which is fine. But we're going to want to move beyond that so that we can get more generalization. We want more people involved because that helps the communicator know this is not just something I do with one person. This is not something I do with just, my really close circle. This is something that I can do with lots of people. And I can do it with people that maybe I wouldn't even see very often physically. My daughter sends text messages to her grandparents, which she sent a Happy Father's Day message to both of her grandpas this year, because she was just really excited to be able to get a message out to them, even though, we're not close to them right now. And so that was great for her to be able to have that chance to connect with someone that she actually doesn't see all that often right now. But if we're working on communicating with new communication partners, there are some things we can think about. We can sort of prep them. If our communicator isn't using whole sentences, or if we're not going to help massage the message into complete sentences, then we want to make sure that they know that that's what's going to happen. And if they get, a message with a couple words, it's not gibberish, right? We're going to assume intentionality, and we're going to encourage them to be able to respond. They may not know how to respond to a message they don't understand. And so we can help them with that. Sometimes the response doesn't have to be a direct reply. It doesn't have to be, in context to what the person said. There's general replies we can say about how I'm so happy to hear from you, and I was just thinking about you, or I'm glad you wanted to talk to me, or turn it around and ask a question. I want to tell you about something that happened to me. Did you have a good day? And having them prepped a little bit for that expectation can help. so that if they get a message that just says, you know, want more, for example, and they're like, I don't know what this means. They don't just shut it down and say, well, I'm not going to respond, or turn it into a question. You know, digital communication for answering questions, you know, if someone sends a message and then you respond with clarification questions, that can get old fast. And so we want to be careful that we're not getting too heavy there. But having these tools and these resources can be great, and it's not hard to train communication partners to do this. We worked with grandparents to do it. And it's more just about just taking a minute to talk about it so that they're ready, and they understand the value and the importance of a reply, because that reply is going to be the feedback, and it's going to give, what's interesting is it actually gives us, when someone texts or messages us back, it gives us a tool that we can use to then craft an authentic interaction. It's a very motivating thing, because someone sends me a message and, oh, you know, we should send them a message back. We should tell them about what we're doing now, or we should talk about where we're going later, or we should just answer the question that they asked. It's highly motivating in an authentic way. A lot of times, you know, we sort of get in this habit where we're crafting messages, and we're sort of inventing situations to try to help the communicator. But digital communication gives us a chance not to have to make this stuff up. It gives us real interactions with real people that aren't mom or dad or the therapist, that we can then have some engagement and some really strong motivations to be able to help the communicator, and to be able to see the value of the things that they're building, and as far as their AAC system goes. So I'm going to jump into CoughDrop. I'll show you some things inside of the CoughDrop app itself that can help us as we're working on remote practice and digital communication. As I'm doing that, if anyone has questions, feel free to post them in the chat, and I will keep an eye on that as we go. I'm looking at my phone because that's where the messages are. Okay, let me jump to my computer. I have a couple tabs open on my computer, so sometimes it makes it a little bit of a trick to find what I'm looking for. I think this is what I want. No, that's not what I want. There we go. Oh, I know where it is. It's right here. I just forgot. Okay. No, stop. There it is. Okay, so I'm going to talk just for a minute about the CoughDrop app. CoughDrop is an AAC app, just like Proloquo or TouchChat or Speak for Yourself or any other apps that you may have heard of. And it does the same things that you expect an AAC app to do. You can use it to hit buttons and build sentences.
I want to.
There's folders, so you can have different levels to your vocabulary set. The default vocabulary set we have is called Quick Core, and it's a motor planning based vocabulary set. So there's a lot of language that's built into it, but everything, most things are 1 or 2 button hits to be able to get to the vocabulary you want. So there's a little bit of a learning curve as you start with Quick Core, just as you learn where things are, but it's actually not bad, and it's pretty straightforward once you get into it. So CoughDrop is cloud-based. It'll run on anything. There's an iPad app, there's an Android app, there's a Kindle app, there's the web browser, there's a version you can install on a Windows computer. So it works with eye gaze, it works with head trackers and head mice, it works with touch. There's lots of accessibility options, so you can support communicators and sort of accommodate them wherever they're at. CoughDrop is, we do 2 months for free. So if you go to the website and sign up, it's all based on a login. The apps are all free and everything. So you download the app, but you need a login to get into it. So you go to the website and get a login, and then you get 2 months for free. So you can try it out. The only thing that isn't in the 2-month trial is the premium voices, because we have to pay for those. But everything else in the app is free. So you get all the data and the logging and the tools and the modeling ideas. All those resources are included in the trial. So you can see if it'll work good. And then after that, you're good to go. CoughDrop actually has a lot of features that are built in to support remote therapy and also digital communication. So I'm going to talk about a couple of those, okay? In CoughDrop, there's this idea, ever since everybody has a login, there's this idea of supervisors. And basically what happens is you add people to your account. So if you have a communicator you're working with, they can add you as a supervisor. They can add their parents as supervisors. They can add grandma and grandpa as supervisors, however you want. And there's a couple different levels of supervisors. So you can have edit permission supervisors, which is what you would do for like a therapist, for example. Grandma and grandpa, you'd probably give them a read-only supervisor account. Supervisor accounts are $25. It's a one-time fee. But we also have free modeling only accounts. So anybody can sign up for free to support communicators. So what that means is they can download the app. They can say, I'm just going to be a modeling only account. Then the communicator adds them. And then they can see the communicators' boards and they can model and support them in their communication for free. So you don't have to buy it over and over and over again for everybody that wants to be involved. And that's because we want modeling, right? We want lots of people who know the communicators' vocabulary, who know how to support them, and are modeling on their own devices. So those are some of the things that are a little unique around CoughDrop. So now I'm going to show you just a couple more things that we do to support the team. Since we have this idea of supervisors, you could be added to more than one communicator at a time as a supervisor. So for example, I have multiple people that I'm working with, and I can switch back and forth between any of their vocabulary sets very quickly. So I can say, you know what, now I'm going to work with my daughter, Becca. So I can switch to her account, and then I can jump to another account and I can work with this individual, and they have their own vocabulary set that they've put together that's personalized for them. As the therapist, I have access to all of these vocabulary sets, or sorry, as a supporter, I have access to all these vocabulary sets so that I can support all the communicators I'm working with. I don't have to know all their logins. I don't have to have their iTunes accounts or anything like that. And since it's cloud-based, I put it on my own device. You can put it on as many devices as you need to, and it'll synchronize across them automatically. So you as the supporter, as a supervisor, you can modify, if they give you edit permission, you can modify their boards from your computer. You pull it up on a web browser, so they say, hey, we want to add some new buttons. Here's some pictures we want to put in of family members. Can you help us with that? You just pull it up on your computer and you can go ahead and make changes to that right here. So you say, let's edit this. I can drag and drop to rearrange things. I can click to open up the settings and be able to change any of the settings for the vocabulary set for that individual. And once I'm done, I just hit save. And then whenever those communicators get internet access, it'll automatically download those changes. So that remote editing tool is nice. It's actually super handy because it just makes things really easy for the team to support the communicator wherever they're at. We don't have to take the device away. We don't have to say, well, send me your iPad and I'll program it, when I get some time, or the next time I'm around there, I'll stop by and see if I can program, or I'll make sure and teach, so-and-so how to do it for you. Anybody can do it as long as they have access from a web browser or from their own device. What's also nice about this web browser option is that it's really great for teletherapy. I don't have to worry about having a mirroring app or anything like that to mirror my iPad into Zoom. I just share my screen and I can show the vocabulary right here for the individual. So I can show the screen, I can jump back and forth between different activities and tools, and all that's right here. I can even, if I'm looking for a button or if I want to help, communicator know where a button is, I can use, we have this find a button feature so you can find what you're looking for, and you can see it'll highlight for you, but also since you're sharing it on the screen in a video call, it'll highlight for them so they can see the pathway that they would use to get to whatever the word is.
Water.
In addition to just finding a button, you can actually do whole phrases. So you can say, I want some water. And the app can show you the pathway. See, like I spelled it wrong, but it still found it for me. And the app can show me the whole pathway for the whole sentence that I'm wanting to put together. And if some of the words are missing, if they're not there, it'll sort of compensate and say, well, this is the closest I can get. And then you pick the closest pathway you can find. See, I thought maybe you want to say, I want mom water, which maybe you did, because that's kind of close to some water. But it tries to help support you in finding the pathway that you need. So that can be really handy and really helpful as you're supporting communicators in the teletherapy sort of a session. Let's see what else I want to show. If you don't know about CoughDrop and the data tracking that's built into it, then I'll show you that real quick. Every communicator, when you sign up for during the free trial and afterwards, if you turn on the logging piece, then CoughDrop will automatically track the usage by that communicator. And then you can pull up and you can see for each communicator you're working with, you can see some summary data. You can see how much they're using it each day, how many words they're using each day. You can pull up a word cloud and see what are the words that they're using most often. You can look at parts of speech and see, are we getting a good breakdown, or are we mostly just using nouns for requesting? What time of day are we using it? So are there big gaps in the middle of the day, or are the weekends a bust? And then we can talk to the team about what we want to do about that. And all this data is just built into the app. You can see where on the screen they're hitting. So if they're not reaching, if they're not crossing midline, for example, my daughter uses eye gaze, and for whatever reason, it's easier for her to get to the top buttons on the screen. We've tried to sort of compensate for that. We've tried some things to mitigate that, but it just seems like it's easier for her to get up there. So because we know that, we can make sure that the words that she's more comfortable with, or the ones that she wants to use, are higher up, so it's easier for her to get to them. But having all that data can provide a lot of value in supporting communicators and understanding their needs. I want to show you another feature which you may not know about in CoughDrop, which is this idea of two-way text messaging. So let's say, for example, that you're working with a communicator and you want to start this idea of digital communication. A really easy place to start is with text messaging. You can say, let's write a message. Let's come up with a message that we want to say, and let's write it, and then we can send it to somebody. And you can do that in CoughDrop. CoughDrop has this idea of contacts. So I can add cell phone numbers or email addresses to the communicator's account, and then they're contacts for that individual. And then if I say, I want to read, let's say, you had a message you want to share with somebody, you can hit this little drop down and you can say share, and then it'll pop up a list of all of the contacts, that communicator has. So you can still share to, you can share to Facebook or Twitter or whatever, but you can also say, I'm just going to send a message to this person. And then what it'll do is it'll actually send a text message or an email, whatever you've specified, to that individual. And then they'll get it on their, whatever their messaging app is. So that was my text message sound. I can pull them up on my web browser. So you can see right here, this is the message that I got. I don't have to have the CoughDrop app installed or anything. It's just a regular old text message that I received. Then I can click that link and I can reply to the individual. I can send them a message, and then they in their app, sometimes it takes a minute or two, but they in their app will then get that message back from the communication partner. So I didn't have to worry about making sure the other person had the CoughDrop app installed. I didn't have to make sure that I didn't have to copy and paste into some other app and go back and forth that way. It's all just baked right into the CoughDrop app. So we can have these two-way interactions and these two-way digital communications like I was talking about, without having to have some of the headache that comes with technology that can come from that. So we use this very regularly with my daughter. She texts her grandparents and she texts her aunts and uncles and sends them messages. And you can actually give them a link so they can initiate a conversation with the communicator as well. So they don't have to wait for the communicator to message them and reply. They can start a message on their side as well. There it goes. So there's the message. You can see I got a message back. I can click in here and I can see the message that I received from the communicator. So that two-way interaction is really nice. And then we get this message back. We can read it together. We can say, oh, let's write a reply. Let's send something back. And we can just hit reply and to be able to craft a brand new message that we send back to them and then reply that way. So that two-way communication is a great example of this digital communication that I'm talking about. All the strategies that we talked about, having emotional connections to people that we care about, being able to craft a message without having to worry about real-time interactions, using our core word of the week or whatever strategy we're currently focusing on. We can leverage those as we create messages for the communicator, and having an authentic interaction rather than an artificial interaction. Even though the person isn't there in the room with us, this is a real message from them, and it'll feel like a real message from them. And we can help the communicator have some more engagement and some more ownership of the messaging that they have as a result of having this as an option. So, oh, one other little tiny thing I'm going to show. This is in beta right now, but if you're working on teletherapy, we have an evaluation tool that's built into CoughDrop. So you can actually,
Find the cat.
you can send this to someone and they can do it inside of CoughDrop. And it's basically, I'm not going to jump through the whole thing.
Find the cat.
But it has a bunch of different sections to be able to sort of assess motor capacity and some cognitive skills for a communicator, so you can see what kind of interactions they have had and what their success level is with them. And then it pulls up a report that shows where on the screen they were able to hit successfully or not successfully, grid sizes and layouts that worked for them, how large of how small of buttons they were able to master. And you can run this assessment inside of CoughDrop for as many people as you need to when you have a CoughDrop account. So this is actively being developed. We have some people we're working with to sort of fine tune it. But if you're interested in it, let me know and I can definitely show you more about it. But that evaluation tool can be great if you're in a teletherapy session and you need to get some idea where a communicator's at, but you don't actually have them in a room with you, because evals can be really tricky remotely. Okay, back to what we were doing. I told you before, this two-way digital communication gives us a new tool. When we have a history of the things that we've said, it gives us an excuse to be able to do these interactions. We have a little bit of control because we can sort of time when we're going to respond. If someone sends us a message, we can say, hey, let's do that after this activity. Or we can hold off and say, hey, look what somebody said to us a couple days ago or a couple hours ago. Let's write a message. And so it can be a chance to fill time, or to be able to, when we need to take a break from what we're doing, we can then switch gears and go to digital communication for a moment instead. Also, though, it gives us this new tool to be able to say, this is what you said. You said this, and then they said this. And it gives us a chance to sort of review the interaction that happened, which can be a great resource to be able to say, when you said something to somebody, there was a result, there was a cause and effect, and we can continue that if we want to. It teaches turn taking, and it teaches this idea of a feedback loop, which we really want communicators to be able to have access to. Additionally, so those are a lot of things that are built into CoughDrop. There's a new app a new website that we put together called CoVidSpeak. If you haven't heard of it, basically it's a video conferencing tool with AAC wrapped around the outside. So it's got some buttons. You can use gestures, eye gestures, or if the communicator can touch, they can touch to be able to access these. And it makes video conferencing a little bit more engaging for AAC users because they can say things. You can have as many levels as you want to this. I'm going to talk about this more in a different session later on, so I'm not going to dig into it too much. But having this idea of CoVidSpeak can be a really great resource to be able to help communicators have a little bit more engagement in those real-time interactions where it can feel a little bit more high stakes. I'm going to check my questions because I think there's a couple questions here. Let's see. Sally, I saw your question and I'm going to save it. Not because I don't like you, just because I'm going to save it to do at the end. Because I think it's a really good question. Let's see. When you say the app works with all access methods, does it somehow make it iPad accessible? Yes. So I'm going to talk about that in just a second. The iPad Pros have some head tracking that's built in, and actually some limited eye gaze that's built in. And we tap into that, or we're about to in a new version of the CoughDrop app. But if you're going to use eye gaze, I would still say to you to Windows. We work with most of the eye tracking hardware that's available on Windows, and it'll just give you better bang for your buck if you really need heavy eye gaze. So I would use the Windows app. That's what my daughter uses. She actually has a dedicated Tobii, but you can buy the gaming Tobii eye trackers, which are $150. It's called the Tobii 4C, and it'll give you the same level of interaction using just a Windows computer. So something to keep in mind. All right, there's some concerns that do come up with digital communication. Like I said before, you have a delay in your feedback loop. So you have to help communicators understand that the message is going to come back later. It's not going to be immediate. Those replies may not be timed well. If you have someone who hears, they hear the notification for a new message and they can't focus on anything else, until you address that. Then you're gonna have to come up with strategies for that, but that's okay. We need to learn that anyway, that we don't, so that can be a concern, but it can also be a strategy that we can use. Sometimes there can be a perceived urgency. This especially is true. There's lots of studies that show generationally there's different expectations around messaging, and older communication partners are more willing to wait for a response, whereas younger communication partners, for example, teenagers, if you don't respond within half an hour, they assume you don't like them or that you don't want to talk to them. And so this is a time where we need to make sure that we level set expectations with those communication partners and let them know what to expect. There's always a risk that the interactions can become high stakes or high pressure. And so we want to be careful that we're not doing that and forcing people to respond if they don't want to, or if they're not comfortable with it. There's a concern on giving out cell phone numbers, but there's lots of ways to get around that. And there's sort of, we can just do email addresses, or there's lots of things we can do. You can have a separate phone number. Google Voice gives out phone numbers for free. And there's things you can do there. So there's ways to mitigate some of this. All right, now I'm going to jump back to Sally's question. So Sally said, during lockdown, I've been hosting groups of young adults to get together to chat about different topics. I ask everyone to think of something in advance to share with the group. I'm aware that AAC users can be left behind in conversations, just nodding away and joining in non-verbally, as despite staff and students waiting for their communication, they have said they feel awkward when they are holding up the conversations. Any ideas? So this is an example, just like I was talking about, how there's an expectation in real time or in face-to-face interactions that we respond in a certain amount of time. And we can sort of help communicate. We can help communication partners, which is those around the AAC user, to understand that it's going to take a little while and to learn to be patient with that. We all can be a little bit more patient, right? And if you've worked with AAC users a lot, then you sort of develop a different timing or a different cadence to that expectation, but it just comes with some experience. But sometimes Sally, you may want to look at some digital corollaries to what you're talking about. If there's a way that we can all, that everybody can post a message or post a video message as a group, maybe you can have some group video feed or something where everybody posts messages, because then they can put it together in a timing that's comfortable for them, and they can set it up so that when the time comes, they have it ready and they can say that, and then they can also respond to other people's without having to do it real time. AAC users are going to be, they're going to have times where all they can do is mitigate that interaction with what response they're capable of, and that may be a smile or a laugh or nodding a head, and we want to make sure we can support them, so they have phrases where they can say, I have a response, but it's going to take me a minute, or give me time to reply, and we learn to be patient with that. But we can also use digital communication like this to be able to sort of support. I told you there was a bonus I was going to talk about at the end. We at CoughDrop have been working on a new feature of the CoughDrop app. It's for iOS and Android, and it's a head tracking feature. So iOS and Android. iOS, it's just in the Pro devices and the iPhone X. But in Android, it's a lot of the devices, actually. They have head tracking that's built into them now. So you can use the head tracking in multiple ways. You can use your head as a pointer, where as I turn my head, the mouse just follows whatever my head is pointing at. Or you can use it more like a joystick, where there's a point on the screen and you lift your head and it moves up until you turn your head down, and then it moves down. You can kind of steer the joystick this way. On the iOS devices, there's actually, we call it eye gaze plus head tracking, because the eye tracking by itself is not good enough. But you can use eye gaze with a little bit of head shifting to be able to steer the cursor around the screen. So you can see I don't have to move my head as much, and I can use my eyes to sort of nudge. So you'd still need both, but it's a new option that is available for some of these iPad Pro devices. Now, what's nice about it is the way we've done this, it's open source. We're going to post the links to it. They're on GitHub, which is this code repository that nerds get really excited about. Nerds like me get really excited about. But anybody can take the code. We put it with a license, so anybody can take the code and add it. So if you have a favorite AAC app for iPad, and you're like, I wish they would add some head tracking features and tools and stuff, you can just send them a link and say, hey, you guys should add this, and then they can adopt it. because we don't need it to be just part of CoughDrop, right? We want everyone to be able to leverage these features as they come to hardware devices. iOS is actually adding, if you didn't know, they're adding some native head tracking tools as well, which can be nice, but sometimes it's a little bit overwhelming. So we want to make sure that people have options. So you can use the built-in stuff that's native to iOS. You can use the open source code that we have in CoughDrop itself, or you can tell your vendors, hey, you really should implement this because I want it in my other app, XYZ, whatever it is. So keep that in mind. We're really excited about what we've been able to do, and we're really excited about how CoughDrop can support digital communication. And how it actually, the more you think about it, the more you can see how it can become a valuable tool for communicators as they develop their skills as AAC communicators. So something to keep in mind. I have a couple minutes for questions. Actually, I have like 1 minute for questions, but I will answer them in chat if I don't see any more as I scroll through right now. Okay, let's see. Is it possible to make larger buttons to give access to the messaging capabilities for people that might have a harder time accessing the down arrow? Yeah, Holly. I'm trying to figure out the best way to do that. Right now, eye gaze users are going to need help sharing a message. And what I'm thinking is we have custom actions on our buttons in CoughDrop. So what I'm thinking is having the ability to be able to specify any button in CoughDrop as a share button. And so you hit a button in your vocabulary and it will pop up your contacts. So that way you don't have to be able to hit that little small arrow thing. I just haven't got to it quite yet, but that's the plan, and hopefully that will work well. One more. When do you expect the evaluation piece within CoughDrop to be accessible? Marissa, if you want to try it, I can send it to you now. You can play with it. There's just some bugs and kinks, but we're shooting for before the school year to be able to have it out and available to everybody. And paid accounts will have access to it. It won't be like an add-on fee or anything like that. So hopefully everyone can benefit from it. And thanks again, everybody, for your participation in chat and for following along. If you're interested in COVID Speak, I have a session later on that, and I'll be digging into some of the features that are available there as well. But I hope you have a great day.